Welcome to the Phoenix Effect podcast with Elle, Kristen, and Dennis. We are three narrative-trained therapists, and we will be interviewing storytellers from all walks of life. We will explore what people do to find belonging, purpose, and success. Listen in as we delve into the depths of the human experience. If you have a story you would like to tell, stay tuned to find out how to become a part of the show. Are you ready for a good story? Here we go. In this podcast, I'm going to go through the basics of what is storywork and why do we do it. In storywork, we take one snapshot of your life, just one scene, and we examine it in the context of a group. As a group, we explore the characters, the plot lines, and the themes. This is not a story of a timeline from a distant level that can be told without a lot of emotional engagement. This is not gathering information. This is not new insight that we do nothing with to change our lives. It is getting into the scenes of past memories. We really get in it. When we do this, we engage a deeper part of our brain, the limbic system. When we engage the limbic system, we engage our bodies. Our bodies remember the sensations we experienced in the story. We engage our emotions in a way that cannot be experienced when we tell about it. When we do story work, we are in the actual story. When we engage our limbic system, we engage our nervous system, and this is what can make shifts in our present-day lives in areas we may feel stuck. Here's an example of what I don't mean. A distant timeline of my life could sound like I grew up in a two-parent home with one older sibling. My dad was emotionally distant, critical, often harsh and sarcastic. My mom had unmanaged anxiety and unaddressed childhood trauma and was my primary relationship. There was never any overt sexual abuse or physical abuse beyond spanking, and my parents tried to instill Christian values by bringing us to church. This is a story told at a 30,000 drone's eye view. It is true. Imagine a drone flying over your town. It could see the houses and the town hall and the gas stations, but it doesn't have a lot of detail. I am not engaging any emotions or making any changes in my life by sharing this. Here's what I do mean. I recall the scene at 11 years old. My friend talked me into swimming naked in her swimming pool. I remember the feel of water on my body, the exhilaration of feeling wild and free. I remember the feeling of terror in my heart when my dad drove by and honked his horn. I remember the utter humiliation and the heat radiating through my body. I remember crouching in a ball in a fetal position afterwards at home as my dad is berating me. He is livid and yelling. I remember the tightness in my body, the difficulty breathing, the heat in my chest, and the reverberating thought that I would never live down the humiliation. This is a story told at a ground level. This is where, instead of a drone's eye view of my town, I am on the street. I see the graffiti. I feel the grass. I smell the fires from the neighbors roasting marshmallows. I hear the birds chirping. Telling a story this way engages the body, the nervous system, the limbic brain, and when they are engaged, growth and change can happen. Why do we need growth and change to happen? Well, the experiences our body had during our formative years were stored in an implicit memory. They are body memories. They help us predict what is going to happen. This is very useful. So when we get out of bed every day, we don't have to relearn how to walk if we are able-bodied people. We just do it. Our brains do this for how we are in relationship to other people as well. We all developed what I call a style of relating in childhood, where our neural networks were formed to help us experience the least amount of harm possible. Something harmful would happen, and our brain made choices about how to predict and respond. With repetition, neural pathways became practiced. With practice, they became our way of being. Here's an example. When my young self heard the garage door go up, my body tightened, my heart rate increased. I vacillated between trying to decide, should I go to my room and avoid, or stay and observe the interaction so I could comfort my mom later. My body anticipated an angry dad coming home that would begin to criticize the state of the house or start telling people that looked too comfortable to get up and do something. My body and my nervous system were primed to expect criticism. How do you imagine this shows up today in my current relationships? Let's just say when I come up against anger, it gets very interesting. This is where, without story work and engaging my nervous system, I could get stuck in repeated conditioned responses that are no longer serving me. As a girl, it served me quite well to stay quiet and people please. As an adult, not so much. But before my brain has time to register that I am encountering someone that is angry, my nervous system has already made the choice for me how I will respond. This is where we want to draw our attention to our conditioned responses and just get curious. What are my conditioned tendencies telling me about my story? Do I avoid people? Do I fight back? Do I have poor boundaries? Am I too boundaried? Do I not put myself out there and not go after things that I want? Am I prone to anxiety or numbing behaviors? This is where we want to pay attention. Whatever our conditioned tendency is, we can draw a direct line back to the scene of our stories of harm. When we can tell our stories, it promotes what neuroscientists call integration. It pulls parts of the brain that disintegrated from trauma back together. Parts of the brain can talk to each other more easily. We begin to become more aware of our bodies and our emotions. We begin to have more choice over how we show up. And this leads to more connection in relationship. This is what we are created for as people. We are connection-seeking beings. We are all looking to belong. In story work, our brains are integrated and there is a new body-felt sense of belonging when we tell these stories to other people that are our compassionate witnesses. This gives us the connection we need. We are addressing two things at once with story work: the body and nervous system, and our need to belong with other humans. We need other people to help us tell a more true story. When I told the story of the swimming pool to my group, Dennis, our co-host, presumed as a therapist that I already knew the harm that had happened. I did not. In this story, my felt sense was I should have known. It was time for my dad to come home. I was being stupid. I deserved the humiliation. It took a group of people naming that I was a girl that was enjoying her body and the sensations that came with being alive. I needed them to name that my dad's reaction was most likely stemming from the white Protestant male view that their wives' and daughters' bodies belonged to them. He was enraged that I was doing something with my body that he did not want me to. He felt it was his right to control my body. I had turned on myself before the story engagement. I held the shame. I learned to close myself off from using my senses to enjoy life. I learned to hate my body and feel shame of my body. I learned to not give myself permission to cut loose and have fun. I needed the outside perspective of a group to be able to tell a more true story. A group of people to all agree that I learned to cut off my enjoyment of pleasure in life. If they hadn't told me, I wouldn't have believed it. This is why we are not reliable narrators of our own stories. We cannot see ourselves accurately in our own context. This is why story work can be more effective than individual talk therapy. Yes, it feels like blasphemy to say as a therapist, but it is my lived experience. If we want to change and grow, we have to engage our stories because we need to engage our nervous system, which means we have to engage our past experiences. And everyone has stories. Everyone has snippets of memories. Everyone's brains experienced harm at some point, and they unconsciously made choices of what to do with that. If I have captured your interest and you want to start exploring your own stories, here are some questions to think about. What is something that happened when you were disappointed? What meaning did you make of it? When you couldn't get pregnant? When you lost a baby? When you didn't get that job? When you didn't get into that program at that school? When that person broke up with you? When that person you liked never acknowledged your existence? How did your body experience it? What happened when you desired something? What happened when you took a risk and it didn't work out? What did you do with that? What did you do when you went to the audition and didn't get a call back? What happened when you tried out for a team and you didn't make it? What happened when you asked someone out and they just wanted to be friends? What happened when you went for the job you wanted and you hated it? When you bought that house and it was a money pit? When you asked a friend to play and they said they didn't like you? When you raised your hand in class and you got the wrong answer and everyone laughed at you? Where in your life today do you feel stuck? Where do you notice that you're doing the same thing again and again? Where do your relationships feel hard? Do you find yourself continuing to say yes and be overcommitted? Do you find yourself immediately saying no and missing out on experiences, relationships, and life giving things because you're afraid of being uncomfortable? Where does the problem in this relationship you have look a lot like the other relationship you have? Are you the giver in all your relationships? Is it hard to be close to people? Can you sense anything happening in your body when you think of where you are stuck? What does it remind you of? Where has this happened before? What were your relationships like with your parents, your siblings, grandparents, teachers? What key moments happened that informed how you felt in relationship to them? Who was absent in your story? Was there someone that you needed to be there that wasn't there? Is there someone in your story that may have had a small role but a huge impact? Do you remember a teacher saying something to you that you remembered forever? These are some questions to get you started. Some people have difficulty remembering their childhoods. This is a typical response to someone that had emotional neglect, meaning their emotions were not attuned to or had some kind of abuse going on and learned to disassociate. If you're interested in story work, don't let this stop you. Get out some old picture albums. Drive by familiar places where you grew up. Imagine your classrooms or where you spent time outside of school. Make a plot line year by year, anything you do remember. Listen to other people's stories. Many times, as we listen to other stories, it brings our own similar experiences to mind. These experiences are still in your body, and the emotions have not been metabolized. It's like they're stuck. My lived experience is that when I got into the nitty-gritty of my story, when I felt the emotions that had been sitting in my body unmetabolized with my safe people in my story group, it was like a release. Long felt feelings were neutralized. Stories that made me cringe for years, they feel neutral now. They do not activate my nervous system. I can respond to my current day life in a much more emotionally regulated way. This is hard work. This is the Phoenix effect. It is diving into the depths, feeling pain, and being born anew. It is a journey, but one that will lead to increased vitality and a life of fulfillment as you get more freedom from your conditioned responses. You will be able to align your body, what you do with your body, with your values. That hard thing you want to do at work, but you haven't done it because there's this part of you that resists being put out there for fear of criticism or being seen. Your body doesn't need that response anymore. It can have the freedom to be seen. That relationship that you can't be vulnerable in, you can slowly show yourself and receive love. That tendency to pursue people that feel emotionally unavailable, you can relax into life. There may be some resistance to revisiting stories of harm involving your parents. There is a natural innate reaction in all of us to protect our parents. We often use the phrase, they did the best they could. This phrase is often something we do to distance ourselves from our pain, as is, other people have it worse than me. I urge you to consider not invalidating your experience. The process of naming what happened in your childhood is not the same as blaming your parents. Blame indicates contempt. Naming is just stating the impact. I cannot emphasize enough how important this is for healing. All of this I have shared with you today is the result of the training I've received from the Allender Center, founded by Dan Allender, along with neuroscientists Dan Siegel and Peter Levine if you're interested in more information. If you would like to work with me in any capacity, you can visit my website at courageousstepscounseling.com. And that's where we end today. We are so glad you joined us. We want to invite you to get involved in the show. First, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. That way, you don't miss out on a future episode. If you're super curious, you can also find us on YouTube. Second, if you'd like to learn more about joining us and sharing your story, send us an email at phoenixeffectpodcast@gmail.com. That's phoenixeffectpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. This podcast and website represents the opinions of Elizabeth Key, Kristen Boskel-John, and Dennis Roberts, and their guests to the show and website. The content here should not be taken as medical or psychological advice. This content is for informational purposes only, and because each person is so unique, please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions. The views and opinions expressed in the podcast and website are our own and do not represent that of our places of work. While we make every effort to ensure that the information we are sharing is accurate, we welcome any comments, suggestions, or correction of errors. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast or website. In no way does listening, reading, emailing, or interacting on social media with our content establish a therapist-client relationship.